All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for our monthly um, session. And this month, the topic is all about Social Security, which is one, obviously, of the most important factors in anyone's retirement and one of the um, parts that always affects everybody, I should say. So it's an incredibly important factor to get right, and I was genuinely just having this conversation this morning. It is something also that maybe the best way to say it is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And we'll go through what I mean by that. But essentially with Social Security, the idea is we want to maximize the amount of benefits you're going to receive in your lifetime, right? And that's what today is all about. Timing, tips, strategies, all that. Well, let's take a step back. Why do we need a strategy? Why isn't it just obvious what the best thing to do is? And the answer is, I'm sure you can figure out why. But the answer is that A, every one of your financial situations, every one of you on this call has a different financial situation. But B, we also don't know how long you're going to live. And I hate to start there. I don't want to make this a morbid thing, but I always tell people I could tell you exactly, mathematically, when to take Social Security if I knew exactly how long you were going to live. And that, of course, is the variable that none of us know. So that's why Social Security always ends up as yep, this is our best educated, well thought out, but somewhat of a guess. Guess maybe isn't the right word, but our opinion. You'll never be able to say without hindsight that for sure this is the right thing to do. Now we can be pretty certain. I don't want to discount that, but it does live to some extent in a gray area, which makes the strategy behind it even more important to make sure you are having an educated opinion about it, not just well, I guess this is what I'll do. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'll get out of the way here a little bit. Again, for anyone who doesn't know me, Anthony Gerbi with Stein Financial Group, and I'll have all of our contact info up on the screen at the end here. So if you have questions or concerns, or you mentioned something and I wanted to go deeper on that, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find all of our contact information on the internet as well, steinfinancialgroup.com. But if you have questions while I'm going through this today, I'll get out of the way while I go through that. There's a Q&A feature. Most of us are familiar to an extent with Zoom, but there's a Q&A feature. There is just a regular chat. There's the ability to raise your hand, and I can even unmute you. It's usually easiest to do the Q&A, and if you want, you can even set the Q&A to only be visible to me, so it keeps you a little more anonymous. Or you can share the question with everybody or the chat. That's totally fine with us. It just gives you an extra layer of privacy. So, with that said, let's talk about how does Social Security work, first of all? And this may be review for some of you. That's totally fine. But let me actually start there because not everybody on this call is on Social Security yet. Some of you are, and this will still be valuable. But for those of you who aren't, you're going to see some acronyms today. PIA is one of them. FRA is another one. Let's talk about that first. PIA, it defines it on the screen, and that's all accurate. But let me just tell you, the PIA is the amount of your Social Security benefit at your full retirement age. Now, you might immediately be thinking, when is my full retirement age? I'll get to that in the next slide. But the PIA is just the number. It's not a fancy term. It's just a word version of whatever your number is, right? At your full retirement age, which, by the way, FRA is full retirement age. So to me, I wish they would do away with this acronym. I mean, there's a reason it's there. It has to be standardized in some way, whatever. I get it. But frankly, nobody thinks about, well, it walks down the street and goes, well, my PIA is blah, 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 and your PIA is blah, 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 and that means this about our FRA. Like, nobody, myself included, nobody talks like that. So It's okay if you kind of let that go in one ear and out the other, the PIA. Just remember that's just a word version of what your number is. Okay. And you can take Social Security, not your PIA, because again, that's at your full retirement age, but you can take Social Security as early as 62 through the normal means. Now, there is disability, which you can get at 60 potentially, or if you're a minor child and a parent on Social Security dies, you can get a payment for kids under 18. Those are all edge cases. I'll briefly touch on those as we go through, but obviously you'll know if that's a situation that applies to you. So if you need to go deeper, let's do that one-on-one because it is very case by case specific. So at age 62, you can start taking your Social Security. It says the maximum PIA that whatever your number is your number. Don't worry about what the maximum is. We should all be so lucky to get the maximum. It depends on what you pay. And here's your full retirement age. Now they did a little bit of phasing here, phasing up of the age. Remember, when it started out, it was 65. And then they raised it to 66, and then they've started to escalate. And for many, if not most of you on this call, your age is 67. Obviously, you can see right there very quickly. What year were you born? For some of you, it's going to be between 66 and 67 in an even number of months. It is what it is. That's not better or worse necessarily. I guess you could say the younger it is, the sooner you get your full amount. But, what's the 4 months, the difference between 66 and 8 months versus 67? That's not that much time difference there, right? But this does get into maybe the number one thing, if I had to guess what you are all thinking as we talk about Social Security. And this presentation doesn't necessarily have a slide that's dedicated to it. We've done this in the past, but let me talk about the elephant in the room, which is, hey, that's great. You're telling me all these facts about Social Security, Anthony. Is there going to be any Social Security in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Will it still be around? And of course, the unfortunate answer to that is I can't guarantee anything, right? This comes down to the federal government deciding to prioritize and fund Social Security to the point that it needs to be funded. Um, Now, what I can tell you is my opinion on that. And my opinion on that, and this is a educated opinion, I'm trying not to be naive, is that Social Security will continue to exist for all of our lifetimes. That is my opinion. Again, there's no guarantee of that. So even a congressperson couldn't give you a guarantee because it gets voted on. And so there's multiple factors at play. But let me explain why I think that. First of all, the reason why this is even a question is because, and you've seen it on the news, and I should have looked it up what the latest projection is, but around 2033, or maybe it's 2032 now or 2034, it changes a little bit. The trust fund, essentially, that funds Social Security is set to run out of money. And you'll hear the word insolvent thrown around, right? That First off, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding with that, and that is true. I'm not saying that's fake news or anything, but here's what that really means. What that means is the bank account that I'm oversimplifying, but the bank account that Social Security has in reserve is set to be depleted by that date, whatever it is now. That does not mean that Social Security would go away, even if that were allowed to happen. What would happen is, similar to how you would think about your own retirement, the money coming in every year would all go out the door every year. It's just inflow and outflow. There's no savings built up anymore. And the latest projections I've seen is that would fund about 70 to 80% of all the Social Security outflows that are needed right now, everybody's check. So that's one thing the media kind of glosses over. Social Security, even if we're speeding at a brick wall right now, and even if we don't swerve or hit the brakes, in other words, to try to solve the problem, even if we just crash right into it, Social Security wouldn't go away, even in that scenario. It would be reduced, and that would not be good, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't go away. And that's one thing I don't find gets talked about enough. But we should not let it get to that point, right? If you're speeding towards a brick wall that you know is coming, you ought to swerve or slow down or both, right? And what could they do to swerve or slow down? First of all, the number one reason why I think Social Security will still be there is just because of political self-interest from our Congress people in the federal government. Obviously, we vote for our Congress people. This year is another election year where the entire House of Representatives turns over. If they don't fix or address this problem, and by the way, I don't believe at any point we'll get like this, wow, it's all fixed, it's permanently fixed now. It's going to be band-aids and kick the can down the road type fixes for that would be my guess, basically in perpetuity. But if they don't fix this or they allow Social Security benefits to be cut, to me, that is an immediate one-way ticket out of office for Congress people. I mean, that would be not just bad for all the people in the United States, it would be bad for the Congress people themselves because that would release an uproar unlike probably anything we've seen lately. Because now we're hitting the pocketbooks of millions of Americans all at once, and this maybe even the more important point, the we're hitting the pocketbooks primarily of the highest percentage of voting cohort. I said that kind of weird. In other words, people who are on Social Security, they vote with the highest proportion of any demographic in America, right? To me, that's a one-way ticket out of office if you were to mess with that. So I think somebody or a group of people or in the entirety of Congress is going to come up with some band-aid, right? What could those band-aids be that won't still affect your benefits? Because they can band-aid it, but they could just cut your benefits to band-aid it, and then you're in the same spot, essentially. The reason I don't think that will happen is because there are other band-aids to consider here. Number one, a first band-aid is, well, what if we just increase payroll taxes? Now that could affect you, obviously, if you're still working, but that mostly affects, younger people, or obviously people aren't usually on Social Security and still working, though you can be, and we'll get into that as far as the rules go. That's obviously one option. Raising the minimum age from 62 to 65. That's another option. Raising that full retirement age, what I've got on the screen right now, to 70. That's an option. Or doing all of those things, but for people who maybe aren't even born yet, or people who are under 18. And let's be cynical for a second. Why would that be more attractive politically? Well, people who are under 18 can't vote you out of office when you cut their benefits or change the formula for them, right? I think that is more likely to happen than any dollar cut on anybody currently receiving or about to receive, frankly. And I think that would be enough of a band-aid where they could continue the program on and say, all right, we've got sort of a semi medium term fix where we don't have to cut benefits. Yeah, is it going to add to the debt of our country? Absolutely. But frankly, that's already happening. And so, long story short, I am not necessarily worried that Social Security is just going to go away. Obviously, they have to do something. We're going to watch that very closely. But I would be very surprised if the answer that they come up with is, well, let's just cut benefits and call it a day. I just think from a self-interest perspective of the politicians, that's their worst outcome. So, it's totally rational to say I don't trust Congress at all, Anthony, and why wouldn't they just take the easy way out and just cut and say, you know what, screw it, we're done. And I can't tell you you're wrong because it just hasn't happened yet. But I don't believe that that's what will happen. So, you may buy that, you may not. None of us know for sure until it happens. All right, let's get back to kind of the substance here where I can get out of the world of politics for a second. So, your full retirement age, again, I already defined it, but your full retirement age is the age at which you can apply for your unreduced Social Security benefits. And by the way, don't get hung up on reduced or unreduced. It's a number's a number. It can be a reduced number and still work great for you. But what it's getting at is if you apply for Social Security before your full retirement age, which again, for a lot of you is 67 or 66 in some months, it was the one that was on the last screen. You get a reduced amount from what you would have gotten at 67. In other words, your benefit goes up every year between 62 and 70 without you having to do anything. You could have been retired for 10 years. It would still go up every year. Not just the cost of living adjustment, but the actual formula increases your benefit. That's why they say reduced if you take it early. Claiming before your full retirement age is a lower amount. That makes sense. But the way they use that term reduced sort of puts this value judgment on it, like it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a different number. If the number works for you, it works for you, right? I don't like it, a stigma attached to it, essentially. Um, the claiming after the stage results in a higher monthly benefit. So you can call that a credit. We'll talk about that. Waiting until 70 actually increases your benefit even further. Here are the years before. Let me get out of the way so you can read this. Um, so based on what you apply, and so here's how to read this chart. If you apply, try to get out of the way, at age 62 through 67, and your full retirement age, if it's 66 in some months, or if it's 67, that's the middle in the right hand column. This is the percentage of your benefit that's getting quote unquote reduced between if you apply early. So let me explain that more simply. If your full retirement age is 67 and you apply right away at 62 as soon as you can, your amount will be 70% of what you were entitled to at 67. It's just a formula. It doesn't matter what your earnings history was. Obviously, that determines the number in the first place, but it's 70% of your full amount or your PIA. Again, I don't like PIA, so I'm just going to say your full amount usually, but that's the same term, same difference. So, again, you're reducing your benefit, but you're getting it earlier, right? So there is a trade-off there. It's not all bad. That's why I don't like the stigma. However, let me say this. I have found, this is anecdotal, but I have found that after actually looking at the numbers, crunching the long-term numbers of how much your Social Security is going to be year after year after year, more people make the mistake of taking too early than waiting too long. Okay, let me say that again. More people, so there's examples on both sides of this, but more people make the mistake of taking too early. Okay, and it doesn't mean that it's a fatal mistake or oh no, I've ruined my retirement because I've done it. But looking ahead, it was knowable or guessable that waiting would have actually made more sense after crunching the numbers. Okay, that's not something I tell people to beat themselves up about. What's done is done. You technically you can apply and then unapply and then apply again later. It's kind of an annoying process, but you can do it. So it's about thinking about it ahead of time, if at all possible. That's the point behind this. Did get a question come through. Is the reduction before your PIA only counted in years? Meaning, does it change by the month or is it just the actual age? Yes, it does change by the month. So it's a sliding scale essentially. So yeah, if you're now here's the deal. If it slides by the month, the 62 and 11 months, if you were going to file, you might as well wait till 63. Usually people are looking at whole calendar years, but yes, it does slide by the month. So it's I'm gonna double check that. I was confident when I started saying it, and I'm like, I should double check that. I'll check it before the end here, and I'll make sure that I'm right about that. But I believe so. Yes, it does. Let's talk about after your full retirement age. What happens if you delay? And it pretty much never makes sense to wait until after 70 to take your Social Security. Technically, you could, but you can at 70 take your benefit, work full time while you're receiving it, and still get the full amount. And there's no more escalation after age 70. So I've never had a situation where it made sense for somebody to wait till after 70 to take their Social Security. Never once. Okay, so pretty much, I mean, I could make up some really weird convoluted tax thing for why it's like, oh, actually, blah, blah, blah. But that's not going to apply to any of you. 70 is the longest pretty much anybody on this call should wait. Okay. So let's just put that on the table. What happens every year after your full retirement age? Well, notice whether your full retirement age is 66 or 67, it goes from 100% to 108 to 116 to 124. In other words, you make 8% a year on that benefit by waiting one more year. That is 8% return on your investment, so to speak, with a government guarantee behind it. You tell me if you can find anywhere else that's giving you a government guaranteed 8% right now. Spoiler alert, you cannot. That is not available out there right now. So that's why it's so powerful to consider waiting. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of reasons to not wait until 70. There are plenty of reasons not to wait until 67. Okay? So this does not mean that, well, I just wait till the number gets the biggest. But let's go back to my anecdotal evidence that more people would be better served by waiting than realize it. Maybe that's the best way to put it. More people come in thinking, I should just take it as soon as possible, right? Who knows how long I'm going to live? Who knows what's going to happen to the benefit? I just want to start getting my checks that I work for. Totally understandable, totally rational to think that way. But let's consider the alternative and what that could mean for your retirement. The only other adjustment that you get from Social Security is the cost of living adjustment, or the COLA, COLA. And that's basically just the inflation adjustment. Now, I don't think this presentation has it. A previous one had the slide of what the COLAs have been in the last few years. For example, a couple years ago when inflation was really high, we got a big one, which was nice. This year, going into 26, the cost of living adjustment is 2.8%. That's pretty typical. I think actually the long run average is like 2.5. So we're right there. And they've projected over the next 75 years, you can't possibly guess what inflation's going to be over that long of a time period. So, good for them for making the projection. I don't really buy it. I wouldn't take that to the bank, but I do think 2.5, 2.4, that's a reasonable number for the near to medium term. So I'm not disagreeing with it. I just think 75 years, that's a long time to project for. Um, did you know that even if you have not yet applied for Social Security, if you are between 62 and 70, and let's say you're waiting until 67, you get the COLA on your benefit, even if you didn't apply. So I had some people a couple years ago when it was, what was it, like 6% or something, or was it even 8? In like 2023, because 2022 was the year we had all that inflation going on. And people were like, should I apply so I can get that big bump on the cost of living adjustment? I said, actually, since you're of age to apply already, you get it anyway. You don't have to apply to get it. So don't feel like you're missing out if another big COLA comes through. COLA, cost of living adjustment. Sometimes call it COLA because it's easier to say. Um, the other thing that I was going to mention about the cost of living adjustments. Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. They're adjusted for inflation. Well, it'll come to me as we're talking. There was one other point that was worth mentioning. Um, that's okay. It'll come to me as we talk about it. So it's simply the inflation adjustment as we're talking. Key points to remember. I mean, these are all great. I try not to just read slides when we do these, but if you apply early, your benefits lower. Simple. If you apply later, your benefits higher. COLAs, cost of living adjustments, I'm just call them the inflation adjustments. That's not what they are. Oh, see, I remembered what I was going to say. Um, this is this is kind of just inside baseball stuff that you're not going to have to worry about, but it bothers me. So now you get to hear about it. Um, by rule, there has to be a cost of living adjustment every year. There has to be. It's a law that they have to do it. However, there have been years where the cost of living adjustment has been zero. So it's a little bit of a misleading fact to say, well, you're going to get a cost of living adjustment every year. It's like, yeah, you're gonna, but sometimes it's going to be zero. So that's I really dislike the way that's phrased. Some people say, well, yeah, it'll go up every year. And it's like, actually, it doesn't have to go up every year. It probably will. Like, but we had a few years in the 2010s where it didn't. So don't any retirement plan that's like this only works if we make this percentage on our cost of living adjustment for Social Security. That's probably not a good plan in the first place. Like that's a really thin margin. But don't just take it to the bank that it's going to be an adjustment every year. It might not. It has happened that it hasn't before. So again, probably we'll get an adjustment every year because inflation will probably continue to go up, but it's possible that you don't. And the way they explain that is bother. How is COLA calculated by the feds? Only inflation based? There is a formula for it. It's not only inflation based. They have some discretion attached to it if they need to. But it is a formula based off of. Oh, see, this is a great econ question from my college days. I want to say it's based off not the CPI, which is what you hear on the news for inflation, but the PCE index, if you want to get really fancy about it. But essentially, it's measuring how prices have gone up or down, and that's a formula. So the baseline number is set by just data, not by somebody in an office throwing their dart at a spreadsheet or something like that. So you can feel a little better about that. It's not somebody's just opinion, although they can override it if they need to, or if they feel like they need to. How to estimate your benefits. Log on to their website. They have great calculators. You can make an account. By the way, about a year or two, it might be 2 years ago now, they basically adjusted this so that even if you call in to Social Security, you're still going to have like this PIN that you can get through the online website. So, can you do your Social Security business in the office? Which, good luck getting an appointment. Or over the phone. Yeah, you can, but they're trying to funnel everybody towards the website. So, it's one of those things you have to deal with, even if you don't want to. You probably want to get signed up for the website and do it. And I'll leave this up for just a second so you can jot this down. Obviously, if you just search Social Security website, it should be the very first one that comes up. Make sure it's got the .gov behind it, and you're good. So don't go to like socialsecurity.com. Hopefully that doesn't even exist. It probably does. Don't go to socialsecurity.com. .gov is the key there. Um, all right, so let's transition to some more slightly advanced strategies, although don't be intimidated. These are not that complicated. Spousal benefits, one of the most overlooked factors. Perfect. Just took a screenshot of if and if you need me to go back to those websites at some point, just say so, and I'll go back at the end and leave it up there so you can jot it down or take a screenshot. Your spouse may be able to claim benefits based on your earnings record. And I'm going to tweak that statement to say almost certainly your spouse will be able to claim benefits on your record. When do you want to do that? Let me explain that because that's the real question. So, Social Security is your spousal benefit is 50% of your spouse's full benefit amount. Okay. Now there's some nuance here. Age does matter here, but let's just key in on that 50% number. By the way, got a question in. Sorry to digress here for a second. Um, on Social Security, this person went to the website. It shows my full retirement age is 67 and an increased amount delayed at age 70. That's the question that just came in. And the answer is yes. Yes, they'll call it delayed. That goes back to this right here, where essentially it's just saying, yeah, you'll get an even bigger benefit if you wait till 70. Don't get hung up on the delayed term. It makes it sound like oh, I'm not on time, I'm delayed. That's not what they're saying. They're just saying by waiting, you get a bigger check. And that's good. You're not being penalized in any other way to make that even. You're literally just getting a bigger check. So that is correct. That's what it should be showing. Okay, so back to spousal benefit. So 50%. Let me just say this in plain English. I know there's some bullet points up on the screen and I'll have some examples, but as a spouse, you are eligible for 50% of your spouse's benefit. Obviously, the times where this really comes into play is if one spouse had a long earnings history or a high earnings history, the other one maybe didn't work all the time. I'll use my family as an example. I work, obviously, this was my job. My wife, we have two daughters, is home with our girls right now. So she is not earning very much to pay taxes into the payroll tax Social Security structure. It's possible, and she may go back to work at some point. She was a teacher for a long time. But it's possible that her individual Social Security benefit will not be half of mine or will be less than half of mine. If that's the case, then we're going to file for spousal benefits. Now, there used to be all sorts of fancy loopholes you could fall into to say, well, I'm going to file for spousal, but not my personal. So my personal will grow and I can get best of both worlds. Don't even think about that anymore. They got rid of that loophole. None of you are, it's not going to apply to any of you on this call unless you're already taking Social Security. It's already, they've already worked it out of the system. It used to be a really fancy way to do it, and you got some extra money, but they closed it. It was a loophole. Question: does the spouse's 50% benefit come out of the primary worker's benefit? Great question. No, it does not. And that's going to be especially important because, by the way, there's ex spousal benefits too. We're going to get to that in a second. But no, it does not reduce the spouse's benefit by one penny. So it's just purely the best thing to do. And by the way, when I mentioned those loopholes that they now close, the way that they close them is that when you file for Social Security, it's called deemed filing. DEEMED. It's a weird word to spell. Deemed filing, which essentially means the Social Security Administration says, we're deeming you, whenever you file for one of your benefits, whether it's spousal or personal, we're just going to file you for both of them and give you the higher of the two. So you want to know that your spousal benefit's higher and know that up front, but they deem you to file for both benefits at the same time. You used to be able to split it, and that's where the loophole came in. Um, the primary worker has to have already filed for their benefits. So it's not like, well, I'm so much older, so I'm going to start collecting my spousal on what they will have one day. No, they have to already be receiving for you to get spousal. Spouse must be at least 62 for reduced benefit or full retirement age. So age does matter. Your spousal benefit will also be reduced if you file early or if your spouse filed early. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing. Question: if spouse started Social Security at 63, can they switch to other Social Security? Does spouse collecting half of other spouses collecting at 70? Does spouse collect half of other spouses' Social Security if collected at 70 or full retirement? So I think what you're getting at with that question is, can you like apply for one and then apply for the other essentially later? And essentially, no. So in other words, if, oh, actually, no, I see what you're asking. You're saying if the first person, let's say the primary spouse, the higher earner, started at 63, can the other spouse wait till that first spouse is 70? Let's use names because I'm using spouse a lot. If Anne is the primary earner, she applies at 63. Bob is the spouse that doesn't have a good earnings record. Anne gets her benefit starting at 63, but Bob waits till Anne is 70 to apply for his spousal benefit. Does that make a difference? Um, no, not in the way you're thinking. Not it doesn't make a difference because Anne is 70. It makes a difference because of what age Bob is, to make it more complicated. So in other words, if you're filing for spousal, both the ages of Anne and Bob matter for whether it's reduced or not for Bob. Okay? Because Bob's filing for his spousal benefit on Anne. The simplest answer to that is frankly, let us calculate it for you. We'll just tell you what the dollar amounts are rather than you having to figure out all the rules. I appreciate if you want to do it yourself, that's great. Like I'm not against that, but everybody's got an individual situation based off how what your age different is and who's going to apply first and what the benefits are. We can help you just boil it down to a number so you can say, oh, well, that number's higher than that one, so I'll do that way. Frankly the answer to that question. But the age does matter, but it's more in your example, Cliff, it's more Bob's age that actually matters rather than Anne's. Sorry to really get into the weeds there. Your spouse must be at least 62. No delayed credits on spousal benefits after your full retirement age. So, in other words, the spouse doesn't get that extra 8% bump every year like you do on your personal benefit if you're doing spousal. And you can only receive a spousal benefit if it's greater than your own. That's the only reason you'd want to receive it, though. So that's fine. Here is a more concrete example. Jack's primary insurance amount is 2,000. Jill's is 800. If Jill applies at her full retirement age, her benefit will be 1,000, 50% of Jack's full retirement age. Okay? So it's based off of the primary spouse's full retirement age, but the age of the spouse, the Jill in this case, also matters. Again, let us just help you figure it out for you. You don't need to know the general case. You just need to know for you. Um, what if the spouse's own benefit is higher? Well, then you don't do it. That's the simple answer. Like, what a fancy example to just say, yeah, if your personal benefit is bigger than your spousal benefit, which is half of your spouse's, then just take your personal benefit. You want the bigger amount. There's no, other benefit other than dollar figure for taking spousal benefits. Divorced. So this goes back to the question of, does the spouse that you're the primary spouse get penalized, or does it take away from their benefit? No, not if you're married, and not if you're divorced either. So did you know, if you were married for 10 plus years, 10 years or more, you are eligible for a spousal benefit on your ex-spouse? And that's true not just of the record they had up until you got divorced. It's true of, all the way through their full retirement age. So in other words, let's say, make up a convoluted scenario, but you were married in your 20s and got divorced in your 20s, and whatever, that's personal. But the person you got divorced from went on to become this billionaire who maxed out their Social Security over those years. First of all, sorry for your loss. Hopefully it was a good decision to get divorced, but you are eligible for spousal benefits on their record. One, this is always the first question. Do they know about it? No, they do not ever know that you're claiming spousal benefits. They have no right to that information. They don't have to approve it. It doesn't affect them. They will never know that you are getting spousal benefits on them. Now, if you've remarried, that now it's kaput. Now your spousal benefit is on your current spouse. Okay, so you can't go back to somebody you were married to and say, well, theirs is actually higher than my current spouse's, so I'd rather do theirs. No, if you're remarried, now it's one at a time. Um, yes, so that's the second bullet point there. Obviously, the same like age rules apply. The ex-spouse has to be 62. And if the divorce was more than 2 years ago, the ex-spouse does not have applied already for their own benefits. So in other words, you could say, well, they're of age, they haven't taken their Social Security, or frankly, you might have no idea whether they have. You're divorced from them now, but you can still get your half of it. So know that that's an option. Obviously, the first question I always get is like, does this penalize them? I just don't want to, like, I got divorced from them, Anthony. I don't want to deal with them anymore. Am I going to have to talk to them about this? Nope. Never have to talk to them. They'll never know. So do what's best for you, essentially. Um, More than one ex-spouse can receive benefits on the same worker. So if we have multiple ex-spouses, or the person that you're divorced from had previous relationships, you can still get the same full or 50%, but you still get the full spousal benefit. It doesn't matter that they had multiple marriages. Benefits paid to one ex-spouse do not affect those paid to the worker. That's what I said. They won't know about it. You have to just show the fact that you were divorced to prove it to Social Security. And if you get remarried at later in life, obviously this would have to be after you start taking Social Security, then the ex-spouse benefits stop because you have a new spouse and you can apply for it based off theirs. So again, that's a pretty rare. I don't think I've had that last bullet point ever happen in my almost 12 years of doing this. So could it happen? Sure. It's not super common, right? Let's go to a question came through. So for clarity, if an ex-spouse files for spousal benefits based on the benefit amount of the primary earning ex-spouse, those benefits do not reduce the benefits of the primary earner. You worded that perfectly. I know that probably felt like you were going insane when you typed that because you're so much general language, but you're exactly right. You're 100% right. The No matter whether you're married or not, claiming spousal benefits does not affect in any way the benefits of the primary spouse or ex-spouse you're claiming on. So you have nailed it, and you've seen through exactly how needlessly complicated it is. So congratulations. All right. So next rule: widows and widowers may receive survivor benefits. I think most of us know this. Here's the most important piece. Other than you have to have been married for at least 9 months. So that's almost never an issue. When a married couple, you have two social, let's say, forget about spousal benefits for a second. You've both claimed on your own individual record, but you're two people in a household. You're married. Your spouse dies. Let me use my family as the example. So my wife and I in the future will both be on Social Security. Let's say we've both claimed our individual benefits. I die. My wife does not keep both Social Security checks She keeps the higher of the two. Let me say that again. In a married couple, when one dies, the survivor keeps the higher of the two checks, not both. That is a very important piece of information because it affects some decisions we're going to make about who's going to file when, potentially. I'll get into that in a second. The survivor must be at least 60 for reduced benefit, 50 or disabled, or full retirement age for full benefit. So age still does matter there. Obviously, that would probably, hopefully, only come into play in a if there was a big age gap. But things happen. People die sooner than they expect, and that's a tragedy, but it affects this. Survivor benefit is not available if the widow or widower remarries before age 60. Why is that? Because they've got a new spouse that will apply for their survivor benefit, right? So if you get remarried, it overwrites. You've got a new spouse. That's who matters at that point. The divorced spouse survivor benefit available if the marriage lasted 10 years. So by the way, you can more than just claim spousal benefits on an ex-spouse. You can claim widow or widower benefits on an ex-spouse. If they pass away, you can continue essentially on with that. So let's talk about well, this is the concrete example that I already kind of gave. Joe and Julie are married. Both are over their full retirement age, so let's say they're both 70 or 67, whatever. Joe's benefit is 2,000, Julie's benefit is 1,200. Joe dies. Julie tells Social Security, and her $1,200 benefit is replaced by a $2,000 survivor benefit. And you can see the little asterisk down there. We'll get to that in a second. Um, so you just get the higher of the two, is what it works out to. Now, a little housekeeping item here. And this is common. This happens all the time. Somebody passes away, the survivor, or even if they're the second to die and the kids are cleaning up for this, Social Security doesn't know until you tell them that they've died. So you might get another check from the person who's passed away for the next month while you're dealing with all the estate stuff if you haven't called Social Security yet. Do not cash that check. Keep the check separate. Is it the end of the world if you cash it? No, but they're going to want the money back. And it's way easier to not cash the check. Obviously, these days it's a lot of direct deposit, so you might not be able to stop it. But even if it's direct deposit, don't touch that money. Don't touch it. Because they're going to pull it back at some point. And just logistically speaking, it's easier if you just act like it's not even there. Use it as your reminder. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I got to call Social Security. Obviously, you're dealing with a lot at that time of your life when somebody has just passed away, unfortunately. Don't just cash it or let it sit there and spend it and say, well, I'll get it back to them. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. They'll figure it out once you tell them. This happens all the time. They're very used to it. But don't just go out and spend it like, well, they were alive for part of that month, I guess. So it's no, no, no. Just if it happened after they died, just leave it there. Your life is going to be so much easier. It's not like you're going to get in like a massive amount of trouble if you do, but it's going to be more annoying and complicated for you to stop it at that point, is essentially the reason. So let's talk about a strategy here. Survivor benefit. Survivor benefit, again, is just you get the higher of the two amounts. Okay. So let me paint a picture. Yeah, this is the slide I really wanted to go into that. So let's say, let's use me and my wife. My wife's name is Emily. I'm Anthony, obviously. So I'll use our names to keep it separate. So Emily and I, we're gonna have different. Um, we're going to have different Social Security amounts. Like, I mean, it's possible you have the exact same, but that would be like just a coincidence, basically. Or unless you work the exact same job for the exact same amount of time at the exact same pay, right? Pretty much impossible. So we're going to have different amounts. One's going to be higher than the other. Let's say, because this is probably what will happen based off what our life so far, my benefit will be higher than hers. Totally fine. We'll each have our own benefit. Mine will be higher than hers. We are, to an extent, incentivized to let my benefit become as big as it can possibly be. Okay? In other words, if it's marginal, if we can make it work, let's try to let my benefit grow maybe even until age 70. And there's a couple reasons for that. The big reason is that as when I die, she will get the higher of the two benefits. Well, if mine's higher to start with, definitely mine's going to be higher if we let it wait all the way till 70, right? So that's the benefit, in other words, mine that is going to live for the life of our household, not just my own life, because it is the higher one. So I'm extra incentivized. Now, I'm also incentivized by the fact that I'm a year older than her and I'm male, and men don't tend to live as long as women. So if we're playing the odds, I'm going to go before her at some point. Hopefully not for a long time, but at some point. Which means that yes, I will pass on that benefit to her, right? So the incentive, to an extent, is for me to wait and let my benefit be the biggest it can possibly be. So a concrete example of that is, let's say you're looking at retiring and you're saying, "Oh, I think we can retire." And by the way, come to us. We can tell you financially whether we think you can retire or not. But let's say I'm talking to you and I say you can retire, but we do need some extra income from when you leave work through when you're going to turn on your Social Security at 70, let's say. Let's have your spouse turn on theirs, maybe even early, maybe even not at their full retirement age, just to get that little extra income to make that retirement plan work, and wait on your benefit all the way until 70 if we can make it. And by the way, if you plan to wait until 70 and you hit 67 and you're like, oh boy, like financially it is tight right now. Like things have changed a little bit from when we thought about this. You can always pull the ripcord, is the way I describe it. You don't have to lock in the age you're going to take Social Security in advance. You can apply at any time after age 62. So if your goal is to get to 70, but I'm 67 and now I'm 68, it's getting really tight. I think we need it. By the way, somebody like me will help advise you on that. We can always just say, you know what? You're right. It is a little too tight. We tried to make it till 70. It didn't quite work. That's okay. Just apply right now and you'll get it started right now. You can always do that. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off of like figuring this out 20 years in advance. Okay, I'm definitely going to wait till 70. Play it by ear. I tell people every year after you turn 62, we should at least ask ourselves, does it make sense to turn on Social Security? Even if we are certain we're going to want to wait, right? Just reevaluate every year. You could reevaluate every month if you wanted to. That would probably make you a little crazy, but you could. Um, so the point I'm getting at with the widows and widowers is the higher of the two is the higher benefit of the two, the higher dollar amount of the two is what's going to live for the rest of your lives. Okay? That amount is the one, if you're going to maximize either one of them, that's the one you want to maximize. And how do you maximize it? By waiting. So a lot of the time, the spouse with the bigger benefit, if you can swing it financially, is the one we want to delay on. The other one, maybe we take sooner just to get some income flowing, potentially. Again, everybody's different. I have worked with couples where I'm like, no, you both need to apply right at 62 because that's when you're going to retire, and this doesn't work unless you do that. So it's not a one size fits all, but it's a very common and good strategy. All right. If you claim, all right, so now we're going to talk about working. I mentioned before that you can collect Social Security while you're working. You don't have to be retired, but there are some key variables here, and that's exactly what we're going to cover. There is, if you apply for Social Security before your full retirement age, every one of you, the latest your full retirement age, again, I put that chart up earlier, is 67. So after 67, for everybody on this call, myself included, there is no earnings test. But before that, or before 66 and 8 months, or whatever your age is individually, if you are working and you are also receiving Social Security, they have an earnings test. Here's how it works. $1 in your benefits for that year alone will be withheld from you for every $2 you earn over 24,480 in income. Now that's a somewhat low bar. Now you might work, part time and make 10 grand a year, and then it doesn't matter. But if you are working or working especially full time, you're almost certainly going to be making more than 24,480 for the year. And every $2 you earn over that reduces your Social Security check by $1. And I've done the math before. That threshold changes a little bit every year because of inflation, but it's like by the time you get to like I think it's 50 or 60 in that range, $1,000, you've wiped out even a maximum Social Security benefit. So that's a point at which you're like, okay, it's it there's a penalty for working. Now, here's the thing. It does not affect you permanently. It's only the year in question. So if you stop working the next year and you're only 63 then, you'll get your full benefit. It doesn't permanently affect you, but you don't you lose out and it ultimately if you're still working, especially in like your career job you haven't retired yet, it almost definitely doesn't make sense to take Social Security while you're still working a full-time, salaried career job. Obviously, it depends on where that number falls in, but I get a lot of people who say, well, on the age thing, well, shouldn't I just take it as soon as I can take it? And if I don't need the money, I can just invest it, right? And you can do that. I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute, especially if you're already retired. But if you're still working, you almost definitely don't want to do that because you're going to get a reduced benefit anyway, reduced on reduced, right? If you take it early, it's already reduced. This is going to reduce it further if you go over that. So, if you are full retirement age, if you're 67 and beyond, then you can work full time, make $1 million a year, and still get your full Social Security check. There is no more earnings test after your full retirement age. So that's one of the other ways that age is really an important number. 67, or again, some of you it will have been 66 in some odd months here. So, um, a lot of people don't realize you can work with Social Security and receive it. You absolutely can. You just want to be thinking about age matters there. So it's important to know those rules before we make those decisions. Little known rules about the earnings test. It applies to all benefits received before full retirement age, retirement, spousal, and survivor. So the earnings test still applies if you're a widow or widower that's younger than your full retirement age. Okay. Again, those are niche cases, but it does happen. It may cause your spouse's benefits to be withheld. So there's a good example of this. Let's say John and Jane are both 62. John files and Jane files for her spousal benefit because let's assume it was more than her personal. If John goes back to work, even Jane's spousal benefit is affected by this earnings test. So it does impact spousal and survivor. Survivor benefits only matters if the person who's still alive is working. Obviously, the person who died can't still be working. They can't get you once you're dead. You can't be forced to work once you're dead. But so age matters. The earnings test still matters there. And if you're self-employed, they're gonna still watch you to make sure you're not getting a little crafty with your income there to make it look nice for their test. They're gonna watch you. So don't, try to skirt the rules there if you happen to be self-employed or if you go into a self-employment after you retire from your main job. Your benefits may be subject to tax. I like that they're optimistic and they throw the word may in there. Good for them. Almost certainly your benefits are going to be subject to tax. Okay. And here's the deal. Depending on your filing status, there's a pretty low bar for whether your benefits get taxed or not. Okay. If you're married filing jointly and your provisional income, which is your gross income, AGI, plus half of your Social Security benefit, plus your tax exempt interest if you have any, if that's less than $32,000, no, you don't get taxed on your Social Security. Now, are there people in the country who that actually qualify for that, or if they're single, it's under 25,000? Yeah. Are is that a for most of you going to be a successful retirement if your gross income is under 32,000? Probably not, right? That's just it's hard to live on that these days. I mean, you're borderline in poverty at that point. And that's why it's important that this rule exists for people who are struggling and shouldn't get taxed on it because they're already having a really tough time breaking even. But it is a very low bar to clear, frankly, for income. That's why most of you, in fact, I would wager that all of you on this call will pay tax on 85% of your Social Security bill. Whether you are single or married, You see, for married couples, your income just has to be over 44,000 to qualify for that. Not taxable income, not after deduction income, before deduction income. That includes the Social Security check itself. So not just outside, half of it, but still includes it. So I'll wager that every one of you on this call is in the 85% threshold there. And what that means then is that not that it's your tax rate is 85% or something crazy like that, just simply that you pay tax on 85 cents of every dollar you receive. That's the only part that is taxable, which think about that for a second. Compared to your retirement account, whether it's a 401k or deferred comp 457, compared to a pension, if you have one, those are all taxed 100 cents on the dollar. Again, 100 cents is taxable. You're not paying 100%, obviously. So Social Security, what I'm telling you, what you should be thinking about is less taxable than pensions, retirement account money, potentially an annuity if you have one, the way that works, or certainly work income. That's also taxed on 100 cents of every dollar. So let's think about that for a second. If it's less taxable, I want more of it, right? I want as much income that's less taxable as I can get because I'll pay less taxes. It's a truism, right? So that is another sneaky reason why sometimes it makes sense to wait on Social Security. Waiting makes it bigger. Making it bigger makes it a bigger piece of the pie in terms of your retirement income pie that you have every year or every month or however you want to think about it. And if it's less taxable, you're paying less taxes by making it a bigger piece of the pie. So that is a sneaky reason to wait. But short answer, don't forget that Social Security is taxable. Maybe other than the question, well, this isn't the question I get, but it's the thing I bring up. Other than just the idea of will Social Security continue to exist going forward, the other point that I like to bring up the most is don't forget to have taxes withheld from your Social Security check. You're usually filing for Social Security when you're retiring or in some around that point in time. You've got a million things on your mind. You're just like, let's just get this check coming because I need the money. Let's just make sure it's coming. And you get the check. You're like, oh, that's a nice check. Great. This is going to work. And then you file your taxes for that first year, and you're like, whoa, I owe $5,000? Like, whoa, what happened? I never owe money. And it's like, oh, I forgot to withhold taxes on my Social Security. Many people, I mean, frankly, like one a year, I talk to somebody who this happens to, at least. And it's very common. Don't forget to do it. Now, what happens? It's not like you go to jail or something. You just pay the tax bill, which is not fun, but you pay it, you move on, and you start withholding for the next year, right? But here's the other thing that happens. When you start withholding for that second year, your check goes down, right? Just like it did at work. And that doesn't feel very good when you're like, ah, I spent the whole first year being like, oh, I'm getting this nice check every month. It's working for me. And now it's 20% smaller than it was. That's no fun. Does that hurt you? Are you penalized for that? No, it's just not fun. And if we think about it in advance, we can avoid that disappointment. So, because I've seen this happen many, many times. Um, Ways to minimize taxes on Social Security. I mean, you can't do anything about the taxes, they are what they are. But we can look at all the other sources of your income in order to try to keep you in a lower bracket in on the whole, in the aggregate. So, no, there's no way to reduce taxes on Social Security. It is what it is. But we can affect the other parts of your income. Maybe we before we take Social Security, we try to draw down your IRA more or do Roth conversions so that we're getting some of that taxable money out of the way before your Social Security check starts. That is very important. In fact, very quickly, there was a question. Is Social Security taxed even at full retirement age and beyond? Oh, yeah. They'll tax you till the day you die. You'll be 95 years old and you will still pay federal tax on Social Security unless they change that. A subject that Congress could change that. They floated that idea. I don't buy it. Federally anyway. Minnesota has also floated that idea because, by the way, Minnesota state taxes Social Security. Not I won't get into that right now. It's actually not very much, and a lot of people don't end up paying Social Security tax or tax on their Social Security in Minnesota, even though there is a formula for it. Wisconsin, for example, doesn't tax it at all, period. It's just not taxed. Minnesota has thresholds kind of like the feds do, but much fewer people pay anything on it. So it's not super punitive, but oh yeah, every check you get, unless they change the rules all the way, no matter how long you live, you're paying tax on it. I should, yeah, I think that's still true. I don't think they set a sunset on if you're over a certain age. It's actually a good question. They talked about that before, whether it's like if you live till X year, like 100 years old, should we just give you your taxes off your Social Security? I don't think that ever went through. I'll double check. We should all be so lucky to get to that point. Um, all right, question. With our current administration of some uncertainty, I know you addressed this earlier about the impact Social Security, but are you seeing panic applications and folks going earlier than they thought they wanted to out of fear? I mean, eh, so basically the question is asking because of all the uncertainty, whether it's politically or just the fundamental balance sheet of Social Security, do we see panic or people saying, I got to get in and apply? Like, I don't care what you told me, Anthony. And we see that impulse. Let me say it that way. I'm not trying to hedge my bets, but let me explain it. Generally, if you're talking to me, you're willing to sort of hear me out and say, "Okay, I'll buy that, Anthony, because you're somebody who looks at this every day." And so I get the panic in the first impression, but I kind of help talk you down out of the panic, essentially. Um, but the feeling is absolutely there, and I have to imagine. Obviously, I can't know what's going on with people who don't talk to me, but for people who don't work with an advisor or work with me, I have to imagine there are those people saying, "Yeah, I got to get this thing applied for. I just don't trust that it's going to be there. Let me get as many checks as I possibly can." That is absolutely a feeling that I imagine is out there because I see that impulse walking in. Generally, by the time you're done talking with me, I'm like, I really don't think you should do that. It's up to you. You can, but I don't think you should panic because of all the reasons I laid out before. So if that's your default state, like, ooh, I am pretty worried about this, Anthony. I'm thinking I might just want to pull the trigger. That is a normal impulse. Like that is common. Whether you actually end up doing it or not is kind of where I try to talk you off that ledge a little bit. But you can do what you want to do. So I hope that didn't sound like I was hedging my bets. It's just my job is to kind of remove that panic, I guess, is what I'm trying to get across. Can you take your benefit if you retire first and then change to half your spouse's benefit after they claim their benefit? So it depends on whether they have applied or not. Now, your question implies that your spouse has not yet applied when you apply. Um, or sorry, no, we're getting back to that loophole that they closed up. Your spousal benefit is not based on whether they've applied or not. It's based on whether they're of age and what their full retirement amount is, whether they've applied for it or not. So you're like, what? And the answer is yeah. So your short answer is no. When you apply, if your spousal benefit, which is calculated based on the full benefit of your spouse, even if they're not taking it yet, that is still deemed filing, as we called it. So you're applying for both at the same time, essentially. So you're not able to do one for a while and then go to the other one. Uh, Hopefully, I know that's clear as mud, but that's the answer. Okay. Minimum. We talked about this. All right. Questions that you might have. You've all asked great questions. We're at time, so I'm wrapping up here. When should you apply? What if you want to keep working? What if you've already applied? By the way, you can unapply or stop it if you have and you feel like you made a mistake and went too early. There's a process for that. You do get delayed credits, then eventually we should be talking about that if you're even thinking about it. How much will you get? How can you maximize your benefits thinking about a spouse or an ex-spouse? What's the best long-term strategy? And just what do you do next? That's the stuff that we help you with. Okay. So with that, I'm going to throw our contact info up and I'm going to circle back here to that first question I wanted to double check, which was, exactly what you asked, Mitchell, about the month by month or the year by year. I believe it's month by month. It is monthly. Okay. I wanted to double check that. Usually, I talk about this stuff enough that I trust my if I'm not remembering the exact answer that my intuition is right, but I like to try not to give out bad info either, so I like to double check. So thank you all for being here. I'm sorry we got a little bit over time. Another question came in. Also, with the new tax code and deductions for elders, technically, isn't there no tax on the first X dollars annually? Well, so I think what you're getting at is just deductions, period. And the answer is yeah, deduction. Obviously, you can deduct whether it's the standard deduction or the senior deduction, the extra 6,000 that everybody over 65 gets if you're under the income threshold. That all can reduce your taxable income on any dollar, including Social Security. So yes, that will still apply. You can deduct out your deductions from your Social Security income. It's not like it's undeductible or something special like that. Does an ex-spouse choose which benefit to take? The higher of the two benefits, or does the ex-spouse get both her personal amount plus the ex-spouse benefit? You get the higher of the two. There is, I suppose I could come up with some really convoluted example where you wouldn't want the higher of the two. That in practicality doesn't happen. You always want the higher of the two. It's just more money. It's just more money, period. Yes, does it potentially increase your taxes? Again, I could make up a really weird specific example where it's like, well, maybe it's actually arguable, but you're going to want the higher of the two. That's what Social Security assumes, and that's what you will get when you file. They will give you, as long as you have to prove to them that you've been divorced, right? By a divorce decree. They don't necessarily know that without you telling them. But if you say, hey, I've got this ex-spouse, I want to see what the benefit is, they're going to give you the higher of the two. They'll always give you the higher of whatever benefits you are entitled to. Again, you have to tell them that you've been divorced. So if you just go log on and you don't mention you've been divorced, then they're not necessarily going to know. You got to prove that. But once you prove it, then they'll do the calculation for you and give you the higher of the two. Um, Good question, though. Anybody else have any questions? Again, if you need to hop off, we're at time, so I'll let you go. But great questions. You can see how into the weeds this can get. And maybe the last thing I'll say really quick is be an evangelist for this. I mean, it's great if you want to evangelize, like go talk to Anthony. I'd appreciate that. But even just the topic itself, you're going to get a replay of this. It's going to go on our YouTube channel. Share the information because there are a lot of people who don't talk to the Anthonys of the world that just say, I'm just going to take it right at 62, and they don't even think about it. And does that sink their retirement? Usually not. But is that always the best decision? It's definitely not always the best decision. So knowledge is power. Spread the knowledge is my go forth and prosper message. We'll be back next month. I forgot to throw up the poll. If you want to pre-register for next month, just let us know. We're going to be talking about charitable distributions from your IRA next month. Sounds like a niche topic, super broad with the way the taxes are now. So it's essentially a little specific tax item that we're going to talk about. You'll hear more about it. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Get in touch if you have questions, and we'll see you next month here. Bye bye.